Welcome back to the channel. So today I am with an advisor here in Asuncion in Paraguay for Maquila, and we are going to be diving into the details of Maquila in Paraguay and what that can look like in practice. So let's get started with asking the most basic question of what is Maquila?
Maquila is a law in Paraguay that stimulates the investment in the jurisdiction, giving a huge discount in taxes, known as the Maquila tax of 1%.
Okay.
And this law, the structure of the law gives incentive for industrialists to invest in Paraguay, to relocate operations here, hire local Paraguayans, and enjoy the exemptions, tax exemptions. From the moment, from import duties to social costs like social security of Paraguay. We have many other cost components like the energy cost, which in Paraguay is the cheapest in South America. The minimum wages are towards the medium average to the lower percentile in the cost of labor.
Interesting. Well, thank you for that explanation of what Maquila is in practice. So why is Maquila so beneficial for businesses, and what are some of the benefits that businesses can get from relocating to Paraguay and taking advantage of Maquila?
Well, in the first scenario, Maquila is very interesting for general re-exporting operations. But there is a case that is more specific, is related to nearshoring operations to Brazil. For whoever wants to optimize the Mercosur jurisdiction, going to Brazil is the main objective, because it's the biggest market. So the role of Paraguay is a diving board towards the Brazilian jurisdiction, setting up operations in Paraguay as a Maquila company. So you have the made in Paraguay, therefore you can re-export it to Brazil with all the savings in cost components plus the 1% tax, the Maquila tax.
Okay, so two pretty big markets are of course Brazil, but also America. So is that a potential for clients as well to really take advantage of the Brazilian market and the American market?
There are scenarios, there is the reversal scenario where probably the Brazilian industrialist is interested to go to America. So instead of going to, straight from Brazil to America, but this depends on the particular item. There, depending on the commercial balance between Brazil and, in this case, America, right? So if we are talking about an item that is highly taxed in America from Brazil, maybe from Paraguay is not highly taxed, maybe even have exemptions as well. Therefore, that scenario makes sense to do Maquila in Paraguay to re-export to America.
So how does Maquila actually work in practice if somebody is looking to establish Maquila in Paraguay?
In order to open a company, a Maquila company in Paraguay, you need to write a letter to the Ministry of Industry. It's a similar, like a letter of intention, LOI, where you state your intention to invest in Paraguay and present the project. So the project, like any business project or business plan, stipulates the objectives and, more importantly, how many jobs you are creating in Paraguay, which is the spirit of the law, right? So in order to have the 1% Maquila tax, ideally you will employ a lot of Paraguayans. Therefore, you can use the jurisdiction to make the differential.
Interesting. So are there any other important steps within the process of Maquila that somebody who's interested in establishing Maquila should know about beforehand?
Yeah. The average Maquila approval from the Ministry of Industry, it takes from 3 months to 6 months. So from my side, for example, what I do is I do feasibility studies. So I have all this time to, in a parallel fashion, do the feasibility studies, depending on the particular investment. If it's a rubber industry requires logistics or material studies.
So we've dove into some of the basics of Maquila and what that looks like, but talk to us about, of course, if you're coming here to establish Maquila for your business, you're going to need a factory. So will you create your own factory? Are you going to be renting a factory? What does that look like in practice in Paraguay?
There are two modalities to use the Maquila Law. One is called the Maquila Pura or pure Maquila, where you set up from scratch, let's say, where you buy the land and you develop your industry, you bring the whole infrastructure from scratch. And there is another scenario very used in Paraguay, which is you rent idle capacity from a particular industry that can lend you that service. In that scenario, that would be, so you save the upfront cost of setting up operations.
Okay, and which route do most businesses that are already established in another country, which route do they typically choose, or do you see a mix?
Well, let's say we're talking assembly operations. For assembly operations, it would make sense to avoid the upfront cost and just rent a place, a warehouse, or whatever needed infrastructure, because it's a simple process. If we are talking about if you are talking about pharma, I don't know if there will be avoidance of this type of setting up from scratch if you need specialized processes and so on.
Okay. So what are some of the potential risks and challenges that somebody could face establishing Maquila in Paraguay?
Well, we can start with the risk. Obviously, like any scenario, they have risks. We have political wise, we don't have a lot of risk because we are center-right, a center-right government where we keep inflation under control. So there are not that kind of risk. If anything is bureaucracy, I mean, but Maquila inside the whole governmental machinery is the best operating unit, let's say. So from that, maybe the time it takes, that would be the risk. There are other risks relating your final market, logistically speaking, depending on the particular item. There are other scenarios where you have less risk. Let's say you re-export services, where you deliver your services almost in real time. So maybe your risk is towards educating your human resources towards your particular required performance.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about that. There is Maquila for goods, but there's also Maquila for services.
Correct. The law says products and services. So you can have, you can deliver a tangible result or an intangible result, like all kinds of, software development or whatever is not resulting in a tangible product.
Interesting. Very interesting that you can have services along with goods. Okay, so is there any other business in Paraguay that's similar to Maquila?
Not necessarily similar, but let's say it's correlative. Let's say you're a construction company. So if we are talking infrastructural development related to industry, that would be super ideal. That would be a big opportunity, for many groups. Because we have cheap energy, so the infrastructural value chain is not fully developed. So this is a big opportunity.
Interesting. So if anybody is listening, interested in the real estate market, that could be a potential option as well.
Yes, I would say the industrial real estate market, especially outside Asunción.
Perfect. All right, so my last question for you is, where do you anticipate Maquila going in the future, in the long term? What does that look like?
There are good chances that the relations with Brazil is still developing, so more Brazilian investors. I would say the relations with American investors is not developed yet, so that would be another source of new projects, and from everywhere else, maybe some Chinese investors.
So Maquila, as it currently stands in 2024 in Paraguay, it's still a fairly new developing market.
Well, the law have more than 20 years, but the law really took off since the last two governments. So for sure there is still room for development.
Awesome. Well, thank you for watching. I hope that you gained some valuable information. And if you are interested in establishing your business here in Paraguay under Maquila Law or otherwise, feel free to reach out to me. All of my information is linked below, and we would be more than happy to get you set on that process for establishing Maquila.